This is Vivian Howard from Chef and the Farmer in Kinston, North Carolina, and you're listening to USModernist Radio.
Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Oh, I don't care what Mama don't allow, gonna draw mine modern anyhow. Mama don't allow no architecture around here.
Welcome to US Modernist Radio, where we talk and laugh with people who enjoy, own, create, dream about, preserve, love, and hate modernist architecture, the most exciting and controversial buildings in the world. I'm Tom Guild. The architects of mid-century houses in the 1950s and 60s are all retired now, some for many years. It's a true privilege, as fans from a later generation, to sit down with these men and women and hear their stories. Joining us today is celebrated architect Barbara Neski of New York City, now in her 90s, famed for creating award-winning modernist houses in the Hamptons. Later, we'll enjoy music with the charming Staci Griesbach, who headlined at one of our Moon Over Modernism events not too long ago. And now, headlining at the Durham Public Library, Mr. Modernism, George Smart.
Thanks, Tom. Public speaking is the number one fear in America, even more than death. That means if you're at a funeral, you'd rather be in the casket than giving the eulogy.
Yeah.
Everyone starting out as a speaker is nervous. We worry that no one wants to hear what we have to say. We say and ah a lot. We write out the speech and read it, not even looking at the audience. We don't inflect our voice at any point, making us sound like zombie politicians. If you look at videos of two master orators, Ronald Reagan and Barack Obama, and watch what they do, not what they say, you'll learn a lifetime of skills in about an hour. I get asked all the time, how do you start in speaking? When I started, I looked up all the civic clubs in 3 counties: Lions, Rotary, Civitans, Sertoma, Kiwanis, many more. Each of these groups, and there are dozens, if not hundreds in many metro areas, they meet at least monthly and always need a speaker. This is a perfect gig for the beginner. Pick a topic you know about or a life experience you've been through, and call up the program chair for that chapter offered to do a talk. Give it a clever name. That helps. In North Carolina, mine is called Mayberry Modernism. A little alliteration goes a long way. Sure, you might bomb a few times, but hey, you've bombed at the Apex Lions Club, not in front of the Bar Association or your kid's PTA. You can also book your own gigs. Public libraries, like our lovely Modernist Durham Public Library, have rooms that are free to use. Pick a topic, invite your colleagues, and boom chicka chicka, you've given a talk. Even if only 6 people show up, you've given a talk. US Modernist Radio is underwritten by Diane Bald and the Budman family, restoring significant architecture in Toronto, Los Angeles, Malibu, and Palm Springs.
Architect Barbara Neski was the co-founder in 1957 with her husband Julian of Neski Associates. They designed more than 35 houses, 25 of which were located in the Hamptons. Inspired by Breuer's Robinson House, she pursued her architectural degree at Harvard under Walter Gropius, one of very few women in the field at that time. She taught at the Pratt Institute from 1978 until 1992, and Barbara became a Fellow of the American Institute of Architects in 1985. You can see their houses at usmodernist.org/Neski, N-E-S-K-I. Now in her 90s, she's still a young woman with a bright future. Here's George's conversation recorded in her New York apartment with Barbara Neski.
Barbara, I understand that you were first inspired by architecture with a house by Marcel Breuer.
That's right, in Williamstown. Actually, didn't think of being an architect. I'm pretty good at math. I thought I'd be a mathematician. I used to draw. I was not a great artist, but architecture seemed like a good combination of my talents. And when I saw the Breuer house, I said, aha, that's what I want to do. I want to do architecture. At that time, I was close to my senior year at Bennington.
At Bennington, yes.
And we had the historian told me about going to Harvard. And so from Bennington, I went to Harvard, which, of course, is where I got my master's in architecture.
So at that time, there weren't many women in the program.
No, there weren't too many. And as a matter of fact, my class, there were 2 women. One who just was sort of hanging on till she married this guy. And the other one was a Frank Lloyd Wright follower. But she was with us Harvard Bauhaus people.
Okay.
And she did her own thing. And the faculty was very nice to her. And I guess she graduated.
Some of the faculty was nice to you, but some of them weren't. I understand that.
As a matter of fact, Hugh Stubbins was on the faculty. He would never even look at my drawings. And I would get A's most of the time.
Yeah.
He couldn't be bothered. I met him later on, and I said, you know, Mr. Stubbins, you never even looked at my work at school. He said, "F you, lady."
Wow. Wow.
Polite guy.
Yeah, really.
Yeah.
After graduation, you went to work for Joseph Louis Serret?
No, the first person I worked for was Grusin.
Okay.
Grusin and Partners.
How do you spell that?
Grucen.
Okay.
Actually, his son is a very good architect. He has his own practice.
So that would have been around 49, 50, 51?
51 or
51.
2.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
But then I went to work for Sertz. Not that we were doing anything. It seems to me all I was doing was making dots on a site plan. But my husband was there, and that's where we met.
But he wasn't your husband yet.
No, I met him there.
And was that love at first sight for you?
Yeah, actually, Cert had a beach party, and Julian had this chartreuse convertible. I think it was a Chevy or something. It was awful, but it was a convertible. And after the beach party, he took me home, and we were married 3 months after that.
Wow, that's fantastic.
Yeah. Mutual Admiration Society. Know that we just hit it off.
At that point, did you keep working for Serret or did you move somewhere else?
Yeah, we switched to Breuer. What happened is Breuer had a secretary by the name of Peg. And Peg called me up and said, Loico would like you to work for him. And I said, okay, but first I'm sending you somebody else because I didn't want to work for Breuer before my husband did.
Yeah.
We weren't quite married, but I sent him, and of course he was hired. And then we got married, and then I went worked for Breuer also. Then we quit. We decided that, one, we wanted to have children and so forth, but he had never been to Rome. I had traveled, but he had never been. So I said, we better go now. And so we took off for 3 months. We started in North Africa and then went up the boot and did our traveling. I ended up in Paris. By that time, I was pregnant. I had a big tummy. So he had me carrying everything. He didn't carry a thing, so nobody would see my stomach. Because apparently, when we were in Switzerland, they really were concerned that I was going on the airplane.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I had a note from my doctor, said it was okay. I came home, and Stephen was born 3 months later in June.
Now, when you were working for Breuer, what projects did you work on? I know there was at least one house in Connecticut.
I worked on one house. I don't remember which one. It was very funny because Breuer was putting stone somewhere, and I looked at him. I said, Loico, you can't do that like over some glass or something. He He said I could do whatever I want.
So starting around 1957, was that when you met Peter Blake, or had you known him before then?
I knew Peter Blake a long time before that.
Okay.
Yeah. Actually, I inherited his wife's maternity dresses when
you were pregnant.
Yeah.
So how did the collaboration start between you and Julian and Peter?
Well, Peter really had ideas, but he didn't really know how to put anything together. So that's what Julian and he did.
He was one of the most influential writers of the time.
Absolutely. He should have stuck to writing. He didn't do much in the way of architecture. He always had to have somebody else do it for him, even his own house. He had this one house where he slept in the basement. That was an interesting house. He's a nice guy. I got along beautifully with Peter. We liked each other. I used to kid him about the ties he wore.
Besides being the managing editor of Architecture Forum, I know at some point he started his own magazine for a couple of years called Architecture Plus.
He couldn't do much by himself.
Okay.
I don't even think he was a registered architect.
Okay.
So he always had somebody else do the hard work. But he got the clients. That was the important thing.
He was the rainmaker for everybody.
That's right.
Right?
Yep.
Were you involved in Architecture Plus, the magazine, at all?
No. Only had our stuff published, but that was about it.
Yeah. So when you and your husband opened up your own practice, how did you know you had achieved the big time? What was the big break for you in publicity?
Well, first of all, you have to realize that we had no money. We didn't care about money. All we cared about was architecture. We got the opportunity to do the Shaliff House. Ronnie Shaliff was a cousin of Bobby Zion, the landscape architect.
Okay.
And Bobby told her she should get us to do their house. So we did. One thing I didn't know at that time is that you submit stuff to record houses or something.
Right.
So, of course, our most famous house was never a record house because I didn't know about that. But then I became friendly with Herb. He recommended that I send stuff. And then I realized that that was what I was supposed to do. So after it was published, what's the name of the house? The very small house that's in the dunes, Gorman.
Gorman, okay. The Gorman House?
Yeah. And he saw that and he asked us to do that. And he was a very good client. That was nice. There's only one place where it's sort of on grade and you could leave, which was the kids' bedroom, because we put skylights in. We were one of the first houses to build in that dune area, and we knew that it was going to be a zoo. So we did most of the light comes from skylights rather than around the outside.
Well, that's what I wanted to ask you. So it sounded like that at some point the Hamptons and Long Island just exploded in growth.
Yes.
When did that happen?
Now.
Well, now for sure.
Now for sure.
But in the past, it was mostly farmland, right? It was slow?
Yeah. I mean, we did a lot of houses there, sort of one a year. We didn't have too much work.
How did your practice change over time? So starting in 57, how did it evolve? How big did it get? And
never got big.
Okay.
It was just the two of us. Once in a while, we had a helper. As a matter of fact, we had a nice Chinese guy who had made an attempt on Czech's life when he was here. So he ended up going to jail. They managed to get him out. He went to Sweden. He and his brother were very active anti-Chinese that was interesting because we were protecting him and his wife and his children. And one day he came in all bruised because he had gotten in a fight. It was Taiwan for the Taiwanese.
Yes.
You Chinese stay out, So it was very political. But we maybe had one or two people working for us. We did everything ourselves. And we didn't have that much work that we ever expanded to a large office.
How long did the practice last?
I don't know.
About 40 years, I'm guessing, you were active?
Yeah.
And then after your husband passed, you kept going with design for a while.
Yeah, well, I started doing a lot of interiors, apartments mostly, which was good. That was easy. And I made one or two renovations to existing houses out there. And that was it. I was getting older, too.
Yeah.
And now I have a great grandson.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Just shows how old I've gotten. And my son recently got married in, of all places, Hawaii. And then they've got the little boy. So the family's growing.
At the time, starting in the 50s particularly, there weren't a lot of husband and wife teams that were in architecture.
No, there were Twitchell Meow.
Ralph Twitchell?
No, Nancy Meow and Terry Twitchell.
Okay.
Terry's father had been Rudolph and Twitchell. Remember them?
Yes, okay.
Yeah.
Ralph Twitchell's son.
Yeah. So Terry and Nancy Meow were partners.
Okay.
Now, I'm trying to think were there others. The big ones in Philadelphia.
Denise Scott Brown and Robert Venturi?
Yes. Oh, I know. There was Mary Merz, M-E-R-Z, and her husband, Joe. They also were husband and wife team.
Joe Merz?
Merz, yeah.
Okay. That's a new name. I'll have to look that one up.
I don't know if they published much, but he's a nice guy. He's still around. She died. Actually, I saw him recently, relatively recently, at a funeral of all things.
I know that computers really came along in the late 80s for architecture and slowly but surely displaced a lot of the craft of sketching, right? Most of the architecture students now are not sketching anymore.
Oh, I know, because they've got computers. I went to visit an architectural office.
Yes.
There were no T-squares and triangles.
Anywhere.
Anywhere. Shocking. I still draw with a T-square and triangle when I'm drawing. I never use the computer. I think I took a course once in drawing with it, but I never bothered with it.
One of the changes I noticed from talking to people who traveled to see architecture is that in the 50s and 60s, they would travel and sketch the buildings.
Yeah.
And now they travel and take photos of the buildings with their iPhone.
Right, exactly. Julian did all the sketching. And we did some photographs, a lot of photographs. We had a very good camera. It's funny, I think Hans Namuth, who photographed some of our work, mainly because he got us the jobs, and we had to have him do the photographs. But he was not an architectural photographer. He did people, beautiful photographs. I'm very friendly now with his daughter. She has a good collection of his work.
Barbara, here in New York, what are some of the buildings and architects that you like that have gone up in the last 20 years?
Well, I have to say I'm not a fan of Frank Gehry.
Okay.
However, that one building that he did, you know the one I mean?
No, not yet.
The museum.
Bilbao? In Spain.
Is fabulous. I mean, there's some parts I don't like, but basically that's the building of his that I thought was most successful. His attitude is just not serious. He wants to have fun. I've never felt that way about architecture.
What about here in New York? Are there some buildings or architects in the last 20 years that you like here?
Yeah, well, I thought that Jim Polchek did a lot of good work. Carnegie Hall and things like that he did.
The renovation of Carnegie, you mean?
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you know he died very recently?
I did, yes.
Yeah. It's very sad because his wife can't see very well, and I don't know how she's managing. It's tough. I never thought he would die. I thought Jim Polchek would go on forever. And we were very close, the Polcheks, and the Neskis, and Papa Christou. Did you know him?
Was he associated with Breuer's firm?
Yeah, Titian Papa Christou.
Mm-hmm.
He had his own firm in Colorado. I think he did a few houses or something. Came to New York, and Loico hired him sort of to write the specs and dig this technical stuff. But he decided to put his 2 cents into design as well. Don't let his wife hear this. But he was not a very good designer.
Okay.
And his house that he finally designed for himself is absolutely atrocious. Atrocious.
Have you seen the Via 57 building that Bjarke Ingels designed on the west side?
I don't know. I think so. There's some good stuff going on.
Okay.
Yeah. And then there's that island.
Are you talking about Little Island? It looks like that?
Yeah.
That is Thomas Heatherwick.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. Tell me about Thomas Heatherwick. And
I don't know anything about him, but I think he's got a lot going for him, and it's going to be fun to see what he does. I mean, he's a young guy, right? Just getting started, and he was given this wonderful gizmo, and it has those piles underneath. The whole idea was unique. We'll see what comes out from him.
That's great. A young man with a lot of promise.
Yeah.
There you go. So what do you do for fun now, Barbara, to entertain yourself? I know you do some jigsaw puzzles. We have one right here beside us.
I spend most of my time reading. And if I'm not reading, I do a jigsaw puzzle. But mostly I do a lot of reading, which is interesting because I never really was a reader as a kid. My husband was, and now just give me a book and I'm happy. And I pick up an old New Yorker and go back and read all the short stories, some of which, by the way, are pretty awful. But that's what I'm doing now. I meet friends for dinner. It's restaurant week coming up.
Okay, yeah.
And Tessa and Peter and I will go out to dinner a couple of times.
Barbara, thank you so much for talking with me. This has been a real pleasure.
Good. I'm glad for your podcast.
George was chatting with acclaimed architect Barbara Neski. Wisconsin-born Staci Griesbach studied piano, alto saxophone, and voice throughout her childhood and got her start in performing with various jazz groups, including her high school jazz band. And then in college, she expanded her repertoire with work in musical theater and a vocal jazz ensemble, and she started gigging with a jazz trio in Los Angeles in 2015. Her studio albums take her back to her Midwestern roots, reimagining classic American country music in the style of jazz. She was U.S. Modernist featured performer at our latest Moon Over Modernism benefit event in Los Angeles, and her latest album is titled My George Jones Songbook. Welcome back, Staci.
Well, it's nice to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Staci, I love the childhood photos on your website.
Oh.
Music was obviously a huge part of your life from very early on a cattle farm in Wisconsin, where the cheese grows. When did music become your ambition?
Well, I think it was always there. It's been slowly peeling back the layers of really uncovering what it is and kind of addressing the vulnerability of doing it. I was raised in Wisconsin, in rural Wisconsin on a farm, and in our old farmhouse that my folks bought, there in the back room, we called it the piano room, and it had this 1920s upright Wellington piano that the family that had built the farmhouse, they had this piano back there. So it was something that I grew up with, the piano. And I think it was around age 6 or so, 5 or 6. I think I kept tugging at my mom's shirt because I really wanted to take lessons and learn how to play this instrument. But my earliest memories are still in that piano room with my mom's 45 records. I think I got a little Fisher-Price record set, one of those that plays Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star.
Right.
And once I had graduated from that, my mom had a pretty good set of 45s. And for some reason, we still marvel at this today. She allowed me as like a 3 or 4-year-old to play her 45s on her record player.
That's love.
Because I was obviously gravitating towards it. And I thought, I've talked to her recently. I said, Mom, I can't believe I never scratched anything, and she probably taught me, but it was so precious to me. So those are some of the early memories of me really getting into music and growing up in that farmhouse. My folks would go out to do chores, but at the time my job was to watch the phone. So my brother would go out and do the farm chores with my parents, and I had to watch the phone. Well, the phone didn't ring so much sometimes. So I had to keep myself busy, and I would do performances in our little piano room, for my imaginary audience. And I think those childhood memories that you kind of remember doing, you're like, wow, how did I know to do that? Or how did I?
Did you give yourself a standing ovation?
I don't think so. I think maybe the cattle did. I would also go out on our for any of those listening who did, grow up around agriculture. If you're around animals, some animals like cattle tend to come towards you because they think that you're going to feed them, right?
Yeah.
So if I was up on top of the round bales or something and I would sing a song, they would all gather around. So who knows? Maybe there was something in those early memories, but
it's a great audience.
It really is. They're very moved.
It's kind of funny to think about, yeah.
One of your albums, Staci, was based on the work of Shania Twain, who I just learned is from Canada.
Yeah.
Tell me what inspires you about her work.
Well, first of all, she's, in her late 50s, and she's doing this incredible world tour, a comeback, if you will, which I think is just absolutely marvelous. But, for me, growing up with Shania Twain, she came on the scene probably when I was in my high school years, that sort of coming of age. And, she broke through so many barriers as a musical artist. First of all, for country music, she kind of came into town and said, well, I'm going to have a different sound, and here's what I want to do. And she had her, at the time, husband and producer Mutt Lange with her. And I think the two of them created this sound that was just so different and so unique. And she broke through all the barriers. And I think, you couldn't help but take notice. But also she embraced her femininity. She embraced who she was. And she made this global stage, and she was just a kid from a small rural community. For her, it wasn't the farm, it was the logging industry. I remember reading in her books and on her documentaries, she came from that working class sort of lifestyle where there wasn't a lot of money, there wasn't a lot of knowledge of how to do things. You kind of had to figure it out. And I guess I sort of identify with that a little bit, and my pathway for how I've come up through life,
This song was written by Shania Twain, released from her second studio album, The Woman in Me, in 1995. It was her third consecutive #1 hit on country radio, and the tune was used in the 1996 film Twister. Here's Staci with No One Needs to Know.
Am I dreaming or stupid? I think I've been hit by a Cupid, but no one needs to know right now. I met a tall, dark, and handsome man, and I've been busy making big plans, but no one needs to know right now. I'll tell him someday, some way, somehow, but I'm gonna keep it a secret for now. Shh. I want the bells to ring, a choir to sing, the white dress, the guest, the cake, the car, the whole darn thing, but no one needs to know right now. I'll tell him someday, some way, somehow, but I'm gonna keep it a secret for now, yeah. We'll have a little girl, a little boy, a little Benji we call Leroy, but no one needs to know right now. And I'm not lonely anymore at night, and he don't know, only he can make it right. I got my heart set, my feet wet, and he don't even know it yet, but no one needs to know right now. I'm not dreaming or stupid, I think I've been hit by Cupid, but no one needs to know right now. No one needs to know right now. No one needs to know right now.
Well, that's a perky little number.
Yeah, I love that.
Wow. It's almost like
thank you.
Like Texas swing or hot club? It's
Well, it's a little gypsy jazz, you know.
Yeah.
We've got Andrew Sinowick there on guitar and Stuart Duncan on the fiddle, and you know, I just kind of wanted to give it a little bit of a throwback to Django Reinhardt.
well, it works.
Now, in addition to Shania Twain, you've covered Patsy Cline, George Jones, Dolly Parton. And before you completed the Patsy Cline album, I believe you did a YouTube series on Ella Fitzgerald. Tell us about that.
Well, Ella's kind of my North Star when it comes to jazz and singing in general. You know, she's called the First Lady of Song because of this. And I think a lot of singers would probably agree with me that she's one of the ultimate voices for, you know, the last century. When I started, you know, really getting into jazz and kind of focusing on this genre as one of these genres to look at in terms of what I was going to do with my music and recording projects, she has been the voice that I look to when it's give an example of a song. How does she interpret it? I look to Ella, and she had her centennial in 2017, what would have been her 100th birthday. And so I did 100 transcriptions of her work in 100 days on video on YouTube. And it culminated with a show here in Los Angeles where the proceeds went to the Ella Fitzgerald Foundation. And it really was sort of that masterclass in the jazz standards, her songbooks, you know, by the famous composers, Cole Porter and Irving Berlin, and what Norman Granz did as a producer working with her as well. So those early songbooks that she did, they gave me a little bit of my idea for how to do my songbooks, you know, in going through these catalogs of Patsy Cline or George Jones or Shania Twain and Dolly Parton. So Ella was sort of my beacon. She is my sort of my North Star. And every time she comes on the radio or a playlist, it's like joy just fills the room. She had an incredible spirit. I never saw her live. I never had the opportunity to witness her presence, but it's felt, you know, undoubtedly through her music.
What's great now about YouTube and other sources is you can go back and catch video clips of almost any performer.
Right.
Which is wonderful.
Well, and interviews and inspiration and, it's amazing what we have access to where, growing up on the farm in the 80s, we didn't have that. You were exposed to the music that you were raised with or the music that was around you, or if you had a local record store or you were taught certain programming in school, that's what we had. And, I have to give props to my folks. This kind of country jazz mix started as a kid because obviously we listened to country music as a family and that was on most of the days, but on Sunday it became a cross of Glenn Miller Band and, the Glenn Miller Orchestra and the Andrews Sisters and the programming that happened on the radio where it took you back to those earlier times. But then also polka, you can't forget the polka growing up in Wisconsin.
Right.
So we had, but then it also went to Chuck Berry and, the Beach Boys.
What was on those 45s that your mom let you play?
Well, do you know, it's really funny, and I can't believe I'm going to talk about this, but there was this one song that I played over and over again, and it was called Last Kiss.
Oh.
And it's a little bit of a dark song.
Yes.
It has a groove to it, but it's a dark song about a car accident.
Yep.
And
it was a big hit.
And I played it over and over again. And I think it's fascinating how, as kids, we get fixated on certain things, but my parents, Barbara Ann, that's my mom's name. So we played Barbara Ann over and over again. And, the Chuck Berry, the Elvis, my mom and my father were both of that generation that came up with early rock and roll. And whether it's the blues and early rock and roll, country music, jazz, for me, my position with my career is to explore it all and show that we're all really more similar than we think as humans. And the music is really, it all comes down to good lyric and good melody. Whether you nestle it in a bossa nova pattern or you've put a little rock groove to it, a good song is a good song. And I think music has a way to connect people, whether you hear a song in a jazz vibe and you dig that, or whether you hear it in a rock version in a club and you dig it that way. That's kind of what I've tried to explore with these cover tunes in hopes that eventually my original music that I'll be putting out will have a signature that's maybe my own, but it comes from these other forms of music that have defined me.
Rolling Stone called Walkin' After Midnight on her 2019 debut album, My Patsy Cline Songbook, a gorgeous jazz interpretation. And Downbeat gave her George Jones album a 4-star review. Here's Staci singing a Patsy Cline classic, Sweet Dreams.
Sweet dreams of you every night I go through. Why can't I forget you and start my life anew instead of having sweet dreams about you? You don't love me, it's plain. I should know I'll never wear your ring. I should hate you the whole night through instead of having sweet dreams about you. the past. Start loving someone new instead of having sweet dreams about you. Instead of having sweet dreams about you.
That is beautiful, Staci.
Oh, well, thank you. You know, I was listening to it. I was like, boy, this really sounds lovely.
Who is that woman?
Right.
Well, it's funny because you make a record, you know, and especially, listen, that album came out in 2019 and I was so thrilled. It was my 40th birthday and I put out my first record and my childhood dream was in process. And I just felt so much gratitude. And then their Patsy and Loretta film came out that year on TV. They flew me my first gig, paid gig, mind you, in New York, was at Carnegie Hall for the premiere of the film. So I can say that my first gig always was Carnegie Hall in New York City.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I played the Country Music Hall of Fame for Patsy Cline's birthday.
Okay.
And then I was selected for South by Southwest as a showcasing artist. And I was just thrilled. And then you know what happened in March of 2020?
Yeah.
COVID happened. And so I've taken these past years to kind of record music and really build my catalog. And so between from transitioning quickly from Patsy, then to Shania, and then to George, and with some Dolly in between for good measure, and even a Carole King tune I've put out recently, you forget what you've done. And so to go back and hear this again today, it's fresh, and it was lovely. Thank you for that.
You're hearing it with fresh ears. That's good. That's great.
And, you know, it's been a joy to celebrate Patsy Cline and the legacy of some of these artists that really paved the way for what the music is. And so it's been lovely working with the estates, working with the families of these artists. You know, Julie Fudge, who's Patsy's daughter, I've come to know quite a bit. And my hope is that, you know, people get inspired by these songs and go back and discover her music again as well.
You can learn more about Staci and her music at her website, StaciGriesbach.com. That's StaciGriesbach.com. Thanks so much for joining us, Staci.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for listening. U.S. Modernist Radio is underwritten by Diane Bald and the Budman family, restoring significant architecture in Toronto, Malibu, Los Angeles, and Palm Springs.
Visit USModernist.org's massive archives to listen to past shows, discover documentation of 20,000 significant modernist houses, and access 4.2 million pages of classic 20th century architecture magazines. US Modernist Radio is produced by Soundtracks Recording Studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. Our theme song is performed by George Smart and Robinson Earl, with guest research by Kelly Policelli. US Modernist Radio is a production of Modernist Archive Incorporated, a nonprofit educational archive for the documentation, preservation, and promotion of modernist residential design. I'm Tom Guild. George and I'll be back soon with another Durham Public Library edition of U.S. Modernist Radio.